I was gonna whiteboard this, but the whiteboard's going all screwy again. So whatever. I want to talk about entertainment guy stuff, so I'm wearing my Flash jersey and Flash hat. Star Trek. Discovery's coming out, and of course we've got Star Wars. We've got Episode 9 coming out, and we've got a lot of people who are not happy with either franchise. Now, I'm happier with the Star Wars franchise than I am with the Star Trek franchise, and yet they both kind of make the exact same mistakes, and it's the same mistakes that we're seeing in a lot of remakes that are going on in Hollywood right now. Now, I watched Red Letter Media talk about short treks. Short treks is these four short stories that are being used to kind of make people remember, oh, this is a series. This is Star Trek still a thing. And to varying degrees of success. And if Discovery was smart, they'd make the show all about Tilly because she's the most interesting new character they've created, or about the engineer. But they're not going to do that. They're going to bring in Spock and the Enterprise and Pike because you can't create new things without making them suck, like the new vision of what Klingons are in the new series. What the hell's that? And just the overall awfulness of Discovery's season one. Because I'm going to be honest, a year out from Star Trek's Discovery season one, I have no desire to go back and rewatch season one to get ready for season two. And I don't really have a tremendous desire to watch season two. In fact, Yvonne and I didn't reach the end of season one. We got close, and we were so put off by the excessive violence, the unlikable characters, the stupid plot twists, and it got me thinking, And then I'm watching Mike and Rich tear it apart on Red Letter Media, and rightfully so. And it had me thinking, Star Trek is not what it was, and this is kind of where I can understand people who didn't like The Last Jedi. So I'm going to talk about both. Star Trek started off as an idealistic series from Gene Roddenberry, where people of different nationalities and races all came together on a starship and they all fought for the same common good. It believed in mankind being ultimately good, and that we would make the right decisions. There would be world peace. There would be a movement away from money. There would be a movement towards a society where we can all work together, and things like famine and poverty would be stricken from the world. And it was an idealistic vision. Now, in the original Star Trek series, they talk a lot of the old politics at the time, and there's a lot of episodes that deal with some sensitive topics, but not a lot of stuff getting blown up. One of the greatest episodes was the Planet Eater. I'm terrified the Discovery's going to end up running into it, and it's going to be like sentient, and it's going to. Anyways, all right. But the Planet Eater episode is great, and yet when you think back onto it and how thrilling an episode it is, very little that actually happens in it. It's the drama. It's the Commodore. It's the Commodore's feeling of failure at having watched his own ship get eaten by this thing. He takes over the Enterprise, and what does he do? He attacks it. And the Enterprise is in its sights. So now here's Kirk on the ship that's damaged, going, what the hell's going on with Enterprise? What are they doing? And this great episode is more about the battle of the Commodore with himself, and about Kirk trying to prove himself to be the more reasonable captain, which you would never know that he was from the new movies that came out. But he is a very thoughtful captain. And while Kirk tends to punch people regularly, he also showed that he was smart. And while he did violate the Prime Directive on occasion, he didn't, like he's remembered to have done. He is remembered as having broken the Prime Directive way more often than he actually did. He was just a little more cavalier about things, and thus I think had the reputation for somebody who was more of a rebel than I think he actually was. And maybe that comes back to the cinematic universe. But Star Trek evolved in that, you have the original series. In the 70s, you have the cartoons. The cartoons aren't bad either. So the cartoons kind of kept everybody remembering what Star Trek was and introduced kids like myself, who were kids in the 70s, to Star Trek. So I would watch the Star Trek cartoon. I would watch the series from the 60s, which was very popular in syndication. Then in 1980, out comes Star Trek, the motion picture. Now it's about V'ger. There's almost no action in it whatsoever. It's about 2.5 hours. It's very cerebral. It borrows heavily from 2001: A Space Odyssey. And it's not an overly thrilling movie, but it's still Star Trek. And it still has its moments. Now, I can't sit and watch the entire movie without falling asleep, and I don't think anybody can. But it has its moments, and it's still Star Trek. Then they decided if we're going to make a movie, we're going to do it right. And what did they do? They grabbed Khan, played by Ricardo Montalban. Now, Khan becomes an iconic villain because of Ricardo Montalban's performance and because of how well written Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan truly is. I've mentioned before, the greatest battle in any science fiction movie in history is the one at the end of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, because it admits that space is three-dimensional. That you can go up and down in space, it's not just all flat. Drives me nuts. There's nothing more frustrating than in science fiction how ships are always like this. Like space is flat. And ships are always like this. Every now and then Star Wars will do it where it looks three-dimensional. You go, holy crap, they're diving through rather than at. Oh, finally. And then they go back to a flat shot anyways. Now, from here you'll see your fleets cannot escape. They could go down, they could go up, they could go that way. But yeah, you're right. Because that one direction is blocked by the Empire, they can't get out. Return of the Jedi pisses me off. Anyways, that made me so angry. As an adult, and as a kid, I was like, oh no, they're trapped. As an adult, I'm like, no, they're not. So Star Trek kind of gets that idea that Khan thinks in two dimensions, and how they eventually defeat him, they outthink him. They outthink the superior intellect. So again, here we are in the most violent, I think, of the movies, and yet really, when you look at the amount of shots fired, it's very little. Every single shot in Star Trek matters. Every single shot in Star Trek Wrath of Khan means something. So you fast forward to part 3, Search for Spock. Here's Kirk going out on this crazy mission to go out and save Spock. But, you know, while this one again has its share of violence, how does it get solved? Not through violence. It gets solved by Kirk outthinking the Klingons, which is a little easier than outthinking your Ricardo Montalban's when you've got Jim Ignatowski as the commander of the Klingons. What happened? Okie doke. And that's a Taxi reference for those who are too young to remember. Christopher Lloyd, you will remember as Doc Brown. If you remember him as Doc Brown, you remember as being intelligent. However, when that movie came out, I thought of him as Jim from Taxi. So I didn't think of him as an overly intelligent person. But, you know, that movie's good. Search for Spock is good. It's better than it gets credit for. And it blew up the Enterprise. Which meant we're going to get a lot of movies where they blow up the Enterprise. Because it meant something. I remember my mother crying when they blew up the Enterprise. Like, it meant something. It was important. And I remember her in the theater with me saying, I can't believe they just blew up the Enterprise. I can't believe that. Because remember, back in the mid-'80s, there were no spoilers online. We didn't know what was going to happen. We just went to a movie and enjoyed it. Then part 4. Star Trek 4 is about whales. Is there any fighting in it? No. Not really, no. There's a lot of slapstick. There's a lot of good jokes. There's a lot of good moments. They don't even have the Enterprise in it until the very end. They're flying a Klingon warbird, which is cloaked for 90% of the movie. It's about whales. And Kirk and Spock learning how to swear. Badly, but learning how to swear. And coming to grips with the fact that he's alive again and trying to put his brain back into order. And making a guess, which is wonderful. And time travel and traveling back to the 1980s and dealing with people being jerks and double dumbass on you. And it was very entertaining, and there was no big fights in it. They drop the whales off, the whales talk to the probe, and the probe goes away. Wunderbar. one of the best movies. The Enterprise, not in it till the very, very end when you see Enterprise 1701A. So you get to part 5, and it sucks, and it's all about finding God. But again, there's no fighting for the most part in it, but there's also no budget, and it really bites the big one. It's crap. So people don't talk much about Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, because it's crap. And I remember seeing in the theater, I went with my friends, and we went the Tuesday after the opening night, or after the opening weekend. And we were, there was 4 of us, and there were 10 people all together in the theater, including us. And we looked around and went, uh-oh, this isn't good. And then we watched the movie, and we learned, yeah, no, this isn't good. This is bad. It's a bad movie. The screens looked terrible. The special effects were crap. It was all crap. And at the end, nothing happened. But it was still Star Trek. It was just a bad Star Trek episode made as a movie. So Star Trek 6 comes along, and it's fantastic. They go back to the Star Trek 2 director and writer, and they say, you know what, can you fix this franchise? And they go, yep. And they did. Undiscovered Country is this beautiful, wonderful tale of Klingons. Now, it's Klingons in the Federation. Could be all kinds of fighting. Yeah, there's like a couple of torpedoes. And then there's a fight at the end, which is absolutely glorious. The fight at the end of Star Trek 6 is almost as good as the one at the end of Star Trek 2. But in terms of number of shots taken, it's not huge. And they are trying to get to Camp Kinnemer. They are trying to get to Camp Kinnemer so that there can be peace between the Klingons and the Federation. It's not about creating a war. It's about stopping a war. It's fantastic. And it shows in the end that you have Klingons, Romulans, and Vulcans and humans all working together on both sides to both create peace and to keep the war going, because you can't trust them Klingons. They're working with us. Oh, wait a minute here. And it's fantastic. And there are some scenes in the movie that are really, truly gripping. And it gave me one of my favorite lines ever from McCoy when they're trying to fix up the bomb there, or the torpedo, and he says, I'd give real money if he'd shut up. And that is a line I have used almost every day of my life since then. I'd give real money if he'd shut up. That is one of the best lines in the history of movies. I don't know why I found it so funny. I was on the floor the first time, but I've used it ever since then. And there are so many lines from that movie that are iconic. And then they fade away into the distance. And then they started screwing it up. So while the cinematic universe was taking all of its bows, and rightfully so, Star Trek The Next Generation is on TV. Now, Star Trek The Next Generation, the first season is mostly bad. It is. But after that, and after they get rid of Tasha Yar, and I don't know if that's related or not, but after Tasha Yar's gone, it's a pretty damn good show. And again, Star Trek Next Generation didn't have a lot of fighting in it. It had a lot of political ideas in it. It had a lot of idealism to it. Picard was a much more thoughtful captain than Kirk, and it started the whole Picard versus Kirk argument. For me, I'm a Picard guy. I think Jean-Luc Picard's fantastic. But as great as that whole series was, and getting all there's some shows in that series I could still sit and watch. Yesterday's Enterprise is an episode I can watch over and over and over again. I love it. Where Enterprise C comes through and it completely changes the timeline. And there's some fighting in that, but not very much compared to what we would see now. And Star Trek Next Generation still felt like Star Trek. It felt like it was in the same universe. And it was later. It understood we want to see what happens later, not what happens before, which Hollywood seems to have lost that storyline. We want to know what happens next. You don't get to the end of a book and go, well, there's all these other ones after, but let's read one of the ones before. As a kid, you want to know what happens next. Hollywood loses the script there, I guess. So Next Generation goes to movies. Well, you can't trust Next Generation cast just in a movie by themselves. So this is where they start screwing the whole thing up. You have Star Trek Generations, which is abysmal. It's terrible. First time I saw it, I thought I enjoyed it. Then my brain started talking to me over the next couple times I watched it with, this is stupid. This Nexus thing is really stupid. Wait, Picard can step out anytime he wants. Anytime. Doesn't matter. Anytime. And he picks then? Oh, that's stupid. That's stupid. That's when Soren, and I know it's Soren, but it's funny because I have referred to him as Sauron, and then Red Letter Media in the review they did kept calling him Sauron. But Soren, yeah, he's expecting company, so, why don't you jump him earlier? Which Red Letter Media talked about in their review of Generations as well. But Generations was bad, and then they had First Contact. Now, First Contact's with the Borg. This movie has a lot of violence in it, and it's dark. And it's too bad because the Borg felt like in the series they were becoming more complicated, more of a society. There was more of a feel that the Borg were in flux, that maybe they weren't just going to be bad guys. But for First Contact, of course, they're back to just being villains. And they add in this queen that doesn't really make sense because there's been no indication of a queen until the movie. And so it's the good one of the Next Generation movies, but just a lot of shooting. And Picard goes from being this thoughtful, deep, emotional man to just fighting a bunch of stuff and screaming a lot. And then the rest of the Next Generation movies are just complete, total rubbish. So, while that's happening on television, you've got Deep Space Nine. Now, Deep Space Nine started out as slow. I remember thinking, wow, this is a Star Trek series where nobody goes anywhere. I don't think that's going to work. That was my initial response. Deep Space Nine, interesting on some level, but I don't think it's going to work as a series because they don't go anywhere. So as the series moved along, they did start going places. Of course, they brought in the little warship that they had there for the Borg that, was nice to have there, the Defiant, right? And then they bring in the Dominion War and all this stuff that happens. But again, you could have had this big, huge battle all the time, and they don't. It is, again, a thoughtful series that talks about things like racism, political ideas, and idealism. And it really gets into it. And it revisits some of the old stuff from the old Star Trek and has recalls, but they're fun. The Tribbles episode with Star Trek Deep Space Nine is fun. And there's a lot of fun stuff in there. Then Voyager comes in, and Voyager made it feel like they were getting kind of long in the tooth. It did. Voyager had some good moments, and I like Captain Janeway. I do. I have no problem with Captain Janeway. And they did eventually bring in Jerry Ryan as 7 of 9, and I still to this day believe 7 was added for the sex appeal. I don't think she was added so you'd have a Borg character. I think it was, we need sexy on the show. We're going to add her for the sexy on the show. Which, fine. Okay, fine. And it was a good show. Genuinely a good show. At points. But I felt like it was the weakest of the series. So you have Star Trek Next Generation, I thought as a series was probably better than the original. Deep Space Nine I would put just below the original series. And then Voyager for me would be a fourth. It'd be, yeah. But still, felt like Star Trek. There was some more explosions going on, but there were some really thoughtful episodes as well. There's still the why does everybody in space speak English aspect of Star Trek, but okay, that's fine too. And it was decent. But then after killing off the Next Generation movies with awfulness, Nemesis was just absolute sheer crap. Star Trek Enterprise comes along, and Enterprise is the beginning. And this is where they lose me. This is where I go, wait, why? And that was my problem with Enterprise. I know it went on for a while. And I liked Captain Archer. You know where I'd like Captain Archer? In the future. And to not have the original Enterprise kind of look like it was more high tech than the Enterprise in the original series, and it kind of lost me there, and I couldn't really get into it. I know it was on for a while, and I tried numerous episodes. I just couldn't get into it. I had a really, really hard time getting into it. I didn't find that there was anything particularly groundbreaking with the show. And so for me, Enterprise, I couldn't do it. And that was really the end of canon to do with the original series, because when it was rebooted by J.J. Abrams in 2009, it's all about explosions and things. Now, the Star Trek 2009 movie, I love it. I think it's a fantastic movie. No, they don't do any exploration in it, but it's fantastic building block, and I thought, they can really go somewhere with this from here. And it was really, really a fun show. It was a movie that showed everybody coming together, and it was cheesy and it was great. And I enjoyed it. Then Star Trek Into Darkness comes out, and I enjoyed that less. Because Benedict Cumberbatch is not Khan. If you want to recast Khan, okay, Khan Noonien Singh, it should be a Hindi actor. Absolutely 100% should be. If you're going to do the recasting, and there are plenty of them. There are plenty of them. Casting a British actor in that part, weird. And I know Ricardo Montalban had the part before. Okay, so I understand that. But there was at no point in that movie did Benedict Cumberbatch look, sound, or act anything like Khan in the Wrath of Khan movie. There was nothing in that character that felt like Khan. Nothing. Khan was smart, and he was calculated. If you've watched the episode in the original series with Khan, he's completely different than the guy that you see in Into Darkness movie. And I've said this before, Star Trek Into Darkness, it shouldn't be Khan. It should be a whole brand new villain. If it had been a brand new villain, you have a better movie. But because movie studios figure you need the familiar name to draw you to the theater because you're stupid, they have to throw in that familiar name of Khan, which makes the whole thing make no damn sense. Which the whole movie made no sense, none. The whole storyline, the battles, none of it makes any sense. Alice Eve, I love Alice Eve. I think Alice Eve is one of the biggest celebrity crushes I've ever had in my life, and she's a very, very, very good actress. And in this movie, she played Carol Marcus, and I didn't buy her as Carol Marcus either, because she's RoboCop's her dad, and she has a British accent. Okay, wait, no, huh? She can play with an American accent too, which is just, I don't understand, because RoboCop's her dad, so if Peter Weller's your dad, you should probably have an American accent. And it's not like they explain in the movie that she went to boarding school in England. She just has an English accent because I don't understand it. Anyways, and then there's the torpedoes. You have to break your hand to open or whatever. Anyways. Stupidity takes over at this point. Now, Star Trek From Beyond. I've mentioned it before. I have a review of it. It's great. Perfect. Star Trek episode quality. So there's a lot of violence at the start, yes, and at the end, but there's some really good stuff in the middle. And I am not anti-violence. I am just using this as an example of how Star Trek has kind of fallen from where it was and from what made all of us love it. So Star Trek Beyond didn't perform particularly well at the theater. And I think they were nervous about that, which is why they announced that Chris Hemsworth was coming back for the next movie to play Kirk's dad, and then there was talk about Tarantino being the director. And now, from what I've seen, it's just stuck in development hell. Star Trek 4 may not happen because the actors are kind of like, okay, well, we're going to do something else. And it's stuck in development hell. But this is where Star Trek Discovery comes into it. CBS has the rights. What are we going to do? We're going to start a new Star Trek series. What are we going to do? Well, we should make it like about Klingons. Well, why are we going to make it about Klingons? Because people know what Klingons are. Okay. So we're going to kind of reproduce like the old series. Well, no, we don't want to do that because people don't have the patience now for what the old series was. So we're going to put in a bunch more like shooting and action. And the Klingons should be darker and kind of evil this time. Not just, slimy villains. So we're going to make them flat out evil and unlikable. But then, the Gene Roddenberry idea that the future is going to be this idealistic wonder, that's not really something we want to push anymore, because that's not really all that interesting. So we're going to make it really ultra violent. We're going to make the violence R-rated movie level violence, and we're going to put in F words and swearing, because we can do that, and we're going to throw it on our monthly subscription thing that nobody wants, so that people want it because it's Star Trek, and we'll make this main character's kind of Vulcan. that way we can have Sarek on the show, and we'll bring in Spock later. It's not Star Trek. This 20, 25, 26 minute journey, I've brought you through Star Trek. What Discovery is not Star Trek. They go to an alternate reality, and I was like, good, they're going to an alternate reality. Now, in the original series, they did this, and it was kind of fun. They did it in Discovery, and it's just really violent and horrible. I did not, for the life of me, understand what Discovery Season 1 was, and then when I saw that they'd gone through different show writers and people have been fired and they'd gone through all these problems, I got it. I understood why. Because it's a stupid idea. All they have to do is say, we have a niche audience for this. We should probably look at what they like. Look back at the old series and see what people liked. Make that work. Make that what the show is. The desperate need to make shows that were basically for a niche audience appeal to everybody is why so many of our beloved classics are just being thrown around and destroyed. Very recently, new Mary Poppins movie, and all the reviews seem to be pretty good. And me being cynical, I go, oh, okay, so they'll make another one and it'll be crap. Because that's kind of what happens. Or they'll do a prequel. We need to show Mary Poppins when she's a little girl. We need to show how she became Mary Poppins. What makes her magical. We need to tell the story. A big part of what made movies work was not telling us everything. Not having to map out absolutely everything in the movie. And not having flashbacks was a good thing. I think for Star Trek, the best move would have been to go into the future. Now, Patrick Stewart has a new series coming out with Picard. I agree with other people who are currently terrified of this. We're terrified of what it could be, how bad it could be. It could be awful. Because what we're seeing with Star Trek now is that it's this violent, hyperactive, hypercolor, maximum, throw everything onto the screen that you can, and oh my god, this is so violent, and oh look, they're torturing people, which is never what Star Trek was. Never. That was never it. See, and people, and even Red Letter Media did this too, they compare it to Marvel. Well, the thing is, Marvel was always a comic series about comic book heroes fighting with each other. So the Marvel movies are comic book people fighting with each other. Star Trek was about discovering the galaxy and traveling and finding new worlds and new civilizations to boldly go where no one has gone before. Now it's about kablam, shooting, fighting, torture, murder, death, kill. It's not what it was, and it is a big part of the reason why I've lost some faith in any sort of reboot, remake, sequel. Even, and I talk about Star Wars too. Am I excited about the new Star Wars movie, Episode 9? Absolutely. Am I nearly as excited about Episode 9 now, in my 40s, as I was back when I was 10 and Return of the Jedi came out? No. Not even close. Not in the same ballpark. Nowhere near. No. We've definitely seen an uptick in the studios trying to make the maximum amount of money out of any of their entities, and yet a lot of times they're failing miserably. They're failing because they don't care what the series was, they just care about the name. They go, we can take this name, tack it up on the wall, and just put whatever crap we want around it, because you'll still buy it because it has that name in the middle. It doesn't matter what we put around it. It doesn't matter how horrible and how stupid it is. It doesn't matter how violent it is. It doesn't matter that it doesn't follow any of the storylines established in the original series. The original story. As long as we have that name, you're going to buy it. The only way that it's going to change is going to be when we stop supporting so many remakes, reboots, sequels. There's nothing more frustrating to me than when I see a reboot coming out. Like, for instance, when they were rebooting Ghostbusters. And when I'm talking to somebody online and I say, that movie looks terrible, I'm not going to support it. I don't care what the name is on it. And what do people say? Yeah, it looks bad, but it's Ghostbusters. I'll go watch it. Right. That's exactly why they get that name. They stamp it on the wall and they go, yeah, people are going to go out and see it. That's why they do it. So when they announce reboots of Back to the Future, and they're gonna redo the whole Back to the Future thing, and we all go, wait, what? You can't redo that. And they placate us by saying, don't worry, Michael J. Fox will have a cameo. Christopher Lloyd will have a cameo. Leah Thompson will have a cameo. This is gonna be fun. We're gonna do a new trilogy here. It sucks. Because if you made Back to the Future now, I almost guarantee would have a PG-13 rating. There'd probably be more swearing. There'd probably be something more overt between Mom and Marty. And, it would destroy it. Just like Star Trek's kind of been destroyed. And I don't know how you save it. But Hollywood getting stuck in going back, go back, go back, go back. Like right now, a movie that's getting some good buzz and definitely great box office, Bumblebee. Technically a prequel to all the Transformers movies. But since it's doing really, really well, we can get a Bumblebee sequel, which is a prequel to all the Transformers. And so it continues. But the sad thing is, I don't think Hollywood will learn from its mistakes. It's really weird. I guess it would sort of be like you have your favorite restaurant. I'll close with this. You have your favorite restaurant. You really, really like their pasta. So they have their pasta. It's amazing. And you enjoy it. You recommend it to your friends. And this restaurant gets rave reviews. Somebody comes in and buys it and goes, yeah, this restaurant's really good. You got all these people in this restaurant. We're going to start sticking M&Ms in the pasta. We're going to put some Pop Rocks in there. And then, you know what else we're going to put in there? We're going to put in some potato chips. Don't worry. It doesn't seem like all this stuff's going to fit with your pasta. But we're going to put all this stuff in there. You know what? Peanuts. People love peanuts. So we're going to put the peanuts, the M&Ms, potato chips, Pop Rocks, all in your pasta. Oh, and we're going to take out the pasta. But we'll still call it the same thing. And then when people come in and order the pasta, blam! They're going to expect pasta, but just think they're going to get so much sugar and so much more for what they... That's so much more than what they wanted. This is going to be great. But they didn't want that. They enjoyed our pasta. It's still the same name. Doesn't matter if none of the ingredients are the same. And if it feels sort of like that candy store across the street, because everything's kind of the same now. They'll just support the name. At some point, we have to stop supporting the name, I guess. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And no, I have no intention of watching Season 2 of Discovery. After 40 years of supporting Star Trek, I think I've given up. So, that's my vote anyways. But let me know your thoughts as always. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. We'll talk to you again soon.